Aisha, you had a moment where you told God you might not live another day, and then Jesus showed up to you in the white room. So, Aisha, tell me more. What happened?
Wow, even hearing that intro just amazed me by how much God has done so far in my life. I've been just even in the prepping of this time together, I've been praying for breakthrough in the midst of sharing because I believe when we do share our testimony, we are aware of how God has been faithful. So just want to say, God is so faithful. Jesus is amazing. And I started not knowing the Lord at all. So back story of my heritage wise is my dad was born and raised in Pakistan, very rich, wealthy family, and they moved around a lot because they were military and a big family. He was the first son after five sisters, and in result, he basically was upheld to a standard of making sure the family's name is respected. And it's very common, even seeing in the Middle Eastern culture that men are revered more than women. So just that aspect, my dad grew up with, even having a lot of sisters. But then he migrated to the States in his early 20s and met my mother. So my mother, her background is complete opposite. She grew up in the Bronx, New York City, in a very poor, very downtrodden neighborhood. And with that, she didn't grow up with her dad and a lot of instability in her life. And she actually grew up culturally Catholic. And when she actually met my dad, she never met anyone like him before with a family like his, and knowing that he had sisters here in the States, like he had families like integrated into the culture. And she was just impressed by the integrity and the respect of elders, and even just the whole aspect of having so much tradition in life and stability was something she was never had like on a consistent basis. And even of her Puerto Rican descent, it was a lot of inconsistency not having her dad in her life. But she did grow up with a wonderful stepdad that I grew up with being my grandpa. And when my parents got together, they really changed the trajectory of both sides of their families because they married for each other, not because of the culture, not even because of like necessarily what other people wanted them to do, because they fell in love. And on my dad's side of the family, they they do arranged marriages, and that was something my dad had set up. They had set up for my dad in case he wasn't successful in the States. So, in Islam, you can marry multiple women, and my dad had all that set up for him in case nothing went well here in the States. So he had a lot of things set up for him just in case. But when my parents met, they wanted to start a family quickly. And it wasn't until my twin sister, I know, Vlad, you have a twin brother,
Yes,
right?
that's right.
So I have a twin sister. Her name is Asia, and we were born in 89. Literally, my parents got married 20 days before we were born. And my mother also converted to Islam. So that whole month was a change of tradition, of just going into a different religion and expecting to raise her kids in Islam. Because in Islam, you're born Muslim. Similar to Judaism, you're born Muslim. And because of your father's side. And I was born Muslim, and I grew up in the States, just a couple years in New York, and then moved down to Northern Virginia, where I still am in Northern Virginia to this day, and in my mid-30s now. So grew up in the DC metro area. My baby brother was born before we moved to Virginia, and we moved to Virginia because my dad had family already in the area. So it was easy for my mom to integrate and raise us with the Muslim culture. And that was what my life was. And going to public school, I was exposed to every type of religion and background. And even our small group of friends, me and my sister, was the petri dish of the United Nations. So we had people from Bengali, Bangladesh. We had people from Nepal. We had people from all types of Hispanic backgrounds and people that we can connect to because of our cultural differences too, that we just blend together. And it was just a normal thing to be around people who thought differently than us. So, because my parents taught us to love people no matter what they are, or what they, their ethnicity, and we were treated that way because we were already different. I already felt very different at a young age. So it was really beautiful just to be able to see all these different cultures and all of us just get along, right, in our social life. Unfortunately, on the flip side, our home life didn't have that cohesive integrity. So within our home, it was more of a regimen of, okay, we have to obey whatever my father says, and however his mood, it influenced the house. So if he was in a good mood, everyone was in a good mood. If he was in a terrible mood, we had to cater to make sure he was in a better mood, no matter, couldn't even figure out what it was half the time, to why he would just act out, and more of a bipolar, attitude and reaction to how we did things in the house. And when, like, the example I always share is when I would set the table and I would put something on the table incorrectly, my dad would slap me, or he would just, he would just be so vulgar towards my simple desire to serve my family and do a simple task, that it wasn't good enough. So can imagine, like, you want to make your parents proud. You want to honor them, right? And you also want them to know they trust that you're representing them correctly outside the house too. So it was really hard to be honest with what was going on in our home without dishonoring our family. My sister and my siblings, like, to this day, were amazed at the fact that, we've had good morals, and we've been able to just be treated in our community so respectfully, but in the midst of our home, it was a complete opposite. So if you can imagine just living like that for so long, it can really get to your mental state and affect every part of your life. So, even in the deeper level of the things going on in my home, my dad was abusive towards my mother. So my father was abusive toward my mother, and it was behind closed doors. So I didn't physically see my mother get, abused my dad physically, but I saw the aftermath of it. And it was so often, it was so common that we tried to leave multiple times. Vlad, it was literally crazy the amount of times that my siblings tried to run away. It was unhealthy. It was so unhealthy to know that where I was sleeping every night, I didn't feel safe every day. Every day, I didn't feel safe. Like, knowing that my parents loved me, they were giving me everything I wanted and needed, but there was an emotional disconnect of not getting what I really needed deep down inside, of feeling heard, knowing, and I'm not only that I'm loved, but I'm supported when I do make mistakes. And I'm not you checking things off the list to make sure you just do it, but you want to, you want to serve your family. You want to do good things, not because if you don't, you're going to get reprimanded. And there's no genuine desire to do anything good when you have in the back of your mind thinking, oh, what is going to happen if I don't do this right? Then there's such anxiety. There's a performance level ideology that is impossible to achieve, especially for humans. Like, our standard of, even when it comes to, in the Bible, like the law, and after Jesus, just took and did everything perfectly, the law became the world's standard of living, not our standard as Christians. So I'm thinking back in my mind, I'm like, my dad had standards for me that were impossible. And on top of that, it was written in the Quranic, doctrine of, if you don't do this, this is going to happen. And it was just so twisted and manipulative, and very contradicting. Because I remember one time my twin sister wanted to go on a trip to perform for a choir out of state. And my dad literally said, there's a Quranic verse that says you cannot leave the state to perform. And we were like, what? That makes no sense. So I was given all these ideologies, just trusting what my dad said. And I didn't even go to the Quran to find those answers or to correct him, because at a young age, when I did ask for help or for direction or understanding, he just said, it's just what it is. It's what I say, no matter what. Like, it is what I say, no, and Allah's word. Like, we're the same. And it really messed up my perspective of the world, myself, really even my siblings and my future. And it it really caused me to really not want to strive to do anything and want to even achieve anything for a long time. And even with the whole tension in the home, I just never felt like I could have breathed. So I ended up doing a lot of self-harm for many, many years. And that gave me a sense of euphoria, right? Because I just felt like I could control something or listen to a song that made me feel good for 3 minutes, then play it again to make me feel good again, because it made me understand that I'm not alone in the emotions I was going through. So that was my vice, like music, very much so. Till to this day, I love to worship, but that, I think, was the crutch for me to like continue living, is just to listen to another song. Listen to another screamo or punk rock song was like my main genre of choice, because of the emotion involved of just being against the world, wanting to feel loved and understood, but not having the words to process it. And it was just really tough to want to be authentic, you know? And really, like, to the point that I just felt like I knew eventually my parents were going to marry me off, because I saw it growing up. I saw my cousins at the end of 16, 15 years old getting married off, and arranged marriages to first cousins. And when my family went to Pakistan once, and when we were 14, I had my first wedding proposal. At 14, right?
Wow.
It's crazy. So, and that was a normal thing just because I saw it growing up. And I know my mom didn't grow up with that, but my mom was about it, because she knew she could trust my dad, and she knew that she could trust even, other family members. But let me give a little bit of insight as to how my particular family was like doing arranged marriages. This is something I've never really shared, but it's really interesting insight of why and what people trust in the world. So my grandmother, she was actually married off at 9 years old. And so how she got married off in the beginning was, once you start menstruating, you get married off. Like, you're considered a woman. And my grandmother actually touched the Quran during her period, and what she told our family was something like manifested inside of her. So a spirit started living inside of her. And from that point on, she had a split personality. And then from that, like, as soon as that happened, well, really, whenever her period started, she's had to get married. But specifically, she was rebellious, right? You're not supposed to touch the Quran while you're on your time of the month. And you're not even supposed to pray as a Muslim, which itself is so dumb, because you need to pray during that time of the month. It is very uncomfortable. So there's also an embarrassment aspect of not feeling holy and clean when it's a natural occurrence in your life. So I say this because my grandmother trusts a spirit living in her to arrange parts of our family's assets, arrange parts of our family's marriages, and what they did business-wise, what they did personally, what they did even publicly as a unit. They trusted the spirit that manifested through my grandmother to make decisions, and they trusted it as if it was like it was coming from Allah, right? And in the culture, people call them jinns, and those are it's all demons. It's all demonic. So and her personality would change. Like, she would smoke cigars, and she would have a deep voice, and it was crazy how much they trusted a spirit to maneuver parts of their life. And my family trusted that to arrange my own like my own future, right? And my dad's response when they had that proposal given to my aunt proposed to my dad, I want your daughter to marry my son. He said, not right now. Let her finish high school. And praise the Lord, right? I didn't get married off because I got accepted to college my junior year in high school. So like that moved everything back. But still, to trust things that are just so vile and unpredictable, right, is just crazy. So I just would have never thought that all of someone's trust would be for something that's just not tangible, right? Um, but that was definitely something that I grew up like just watching and witnessing, and it was just a normal thing. But the more so, it was just the unpredictability was what I was mostly uncomfortable with in my home and in my life. So at one point, I told my parents, I know something was wrong with me mentally because our home life is unstable. I need help. I need mental help. I need someone to talk to. I need a counselor because I don't feel motivated to live. I don't feel motivated to even like wake up anymore. And this was when I was in elementary school when I had told my parents that. And I had been feeling like that for years. And their reaction was, you're not praying enough and you're not going to the Quran enough to find your answers and your peace and your solace. And it broke my heart because my family basically said I was crazy for thinking that I was mentally unstable, living in a very toxic environment. And it made me worse. I tried to go to the Quran, reading English translations and the Quran that I had available. It just didn't feel I had some type of peace when I would go to it. And it'd be contradicting, saying you can lie here, and then if you don't lie, then you get blasphemed. And like, it's just, then women are allowed to be treated this way and then not this way. And then women can't even go to heaven. And like all these like different things that I would read in the Quran that I would try to address to my dad. He would say, is this what it is? So it made my questioning worse of my purpose. And I say purpose is important because it drives every defining factor of why you do things. And my purpose growing up was I knew I'm going to get married off. And that was one of my purposes. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to go to school because I should be married off after high school. So what's the purpose of me wanting to do good, right? And my mental health just got worse. And the self-mutilation got worse. My self-esteem got worse. And it was just a mind game of just, okay, one day I'm just surviving every day. I'm just surviving another day. I'm surviving another day. I'm surviving another day waking up. I'm surviving another day going to school. I'm surviving another day just trying to cater to my dad and my mom and my brother and my sister. And we're all living in this just trauma over and over again every day. And it was exhausting. It was exhausting. And it's just so exhausting to the point that I felt like, what's the purpose of me being here? For so long, I just felt like if I'm just not here anymore, I don't have to deal with all of what I have to face and the unknown and all these aspirations of me wanting to dream. So I think one also big aspect of my upbringing is that my dad had a terrible addiction problem. And with watching adult films all the way through drugs and alcohol and all in between. And that was an open secret in our home that we weren't able to tell anybody. That really made all of the abuse worse because it's just, first of all, it was unpredictable. And anytime that my father would be under the influence, he would be affectionate towards us. So my concept of affection toward my dad was twisted and just didn't have a good match of authenticity, because when he would be under the influence, he would be affectionate and I would share he would be affectionate to me and I'm like, wow, but then he would forget about it and wouldn't even be close to that when he was sober. And I want to say, thankfully, all that's behind him now, right? He's a lot better in that from that part of his life, but took a long time for me to heal from that. And with that, I just had no assurance to go to my dad for anything. And it troubled me because you should be able to go to your parents. You should be able to go to your even siblings to be honest and open, especially when you're living in such traumatic circumstances. But it wasn't a safe place to do that. And back to just just reevaluating my purpose again is that I felt like, okay, I'm surviving. I don't know what's going to happen after I graduate. And I can't even have dreams. I can't even aspire to have dreams as a woman or have voice. So why am I here? And I remember my mother, like I said, she grew up Catholic and had a praying mother. My grandmother was a prayer warrior. She loved the Lord so much and prayed all the time and interceded for her family. She was my best friend when she was on this earth. She's with Jesus now. And she was my best friend after I came to know, the Lord. And I believed that my grandmother's prayers is what really encouraged my mother to say this. And she said, when you're up at night and you can't sleep, you're troubled, and you're not at ease to rest your head, talk to God. He is up all night and is willing to listen. That is not a concept Muslims have in regards to communication with Allah. They don't have that. They don't have the freedom to do it because they have to be pray in Arabic. They have to pray in a certain time. They have to pray in a certain direction. They have to do certain things to wash their bodies to go before Allah and not even have freedom to express themselves, only but a short time in their time of prayer. But there's no real communication. And I had already felt that disconnect from God because of what my dad showed of who God is or whoever I was worshiping as Allah, right? So that disconnect was such a huge gap of not being heard, not being even recognized, even corrected, in a loving way. So the fact that my grandmother told my mother, you can talk to God with all your troubles. And I took advantage of that. I remembered that moment that my mother told us all the time. She was like, just go talk to God. He's up all night. And that one night I did. I took advantage of my mom's, advice. And I said, God or Allah, I hate you. Like, you suck. Like I can't imagine living this life because I don't have any connection with you because I don't know you. I hate you. You're not answering my prayers. You're not showing up in my life. And I'm trying to connect with you, but I can't. You seem so far away. Who are you? I know deep in my heart, I'm a worshiper, but I didn't know who I was meant to worship. And that was a deep longing in my heart to worship God, but didn't have any perspective or connection and didn't even really want acknowledgement from God, but just, I hear you, my daughter. And I never heard anything from Allah, from prayers, from doing the wuzu, like praying in the community and doing all this community service and being a good, student in school and all these like things that I'm like living a way that I'm expected to live, and haven't had any encounter or reaction that I'm doing anything remotely right to get God's attention. And I went down the line, growing up in Northern Virginia and public school, I knew about all these different gods. Like I knew about Buddha, I knew about Krishna, I knew about like even other sects of Christianity. I knew about it. And I knew about Jesus. I knew about Mary. I said, I don't know who you are. If you're Buddha, if you're Krishna, if you're Mary, if you're Jesus, if you're Allah, if you're God, I don't know who you are, but you need to show up. You need to show up. Because I don't want to live here anymore. I can't. I'm wasting my time trying. I'm wasting my effort to even feel like it's worth trying to be a person in this world. This world is beautiful and also disgusting at the same time. Where is the medium of finding that this is worth being in? And I told God, I said, whoever you are, my twin sister's in this room with me, and I don't even want to live anymore. So if you don't show up, my sister will find me dead tomorrow. I said, I'm done. I've tried being an obedient daughter. I tried to be an obedient Muslim. I tried to be a good person in general. But there's nothing worth me grabbing to breathe for. There's nothing in me that's worth being able to feel anything good or bad. Like, I didn't want to feel anything. I just wanted to be numb and wanted to escape all the pain that I was only exposed to since I was born. That was all I knew, and had moments of good memories of my family, but it was fleeting. It was so fleeting. And I said, I'm done. I just given up of caring and trying to ask for help and pleading and even, trying to find ways to cope. And out of that, I just fell asleep out of exhaustion, really, because it was just my first honest conversation with anybody that was, available to hear me out. And I experienced a phenomenal dream. I remember being in a white room, like you mentioned before, and the first thing I noticed in the actual room was an emotion of peace. That was the first time I had ever felt peace in my life. I never felt that stability of, whew, okay, I'm good. No one's gonna hurt me. I'm not anxious. No one's gonna yell at me, and no one's gonna hit me. No one's gonna look at me in a wrong way or scorn me or say I'm not good enough or emotionally hurt me or physically hurt me. I felt at ease. And that just blew me away. Just even feeling like I could just be in the moment and not worry about what's going to happen in the next moment or reflect on what just happened, right? And I realized the room started getting bigger and in all directions as if it became infinite. And I felt like I was literally floating. And before me, I started seeing somebody coming towards me. And again, I'm not afraid, right? There's no fear, there's peace. And I realized this person in front of me had a cloak that was wavy and flowy and long, and it was filling the room. And then I noticed their arms were wide open, like a T form. And I immediately saw scars on the person's wrist and knew that it was Jesus. Wow. Jesus was right in front of me. And a beam of light was coming out of his face. Then I heard his voice. I heard Jesus' voice. And he said, "Give me your heart, and I will love you forever." Give me your heart, and I will love you forever. I didn't have a heart to give him. Because I was beat up, I was torn down, I was lied to, just abused, hurt, and torn apart by people that look like me, people that loved me, people that were supposed to protect me, people that were supposed to be my safe place. And my heart was in pieces, like crunched and crushed and torn and tattered. That's all I could just, concept of my heart was just in that condition, messed up and broken in tiny pieces. I felt like I had a piece of salt or a piece of sand left over to offer the Lord, to offer Jesus. That's all I had. That's all I had in front of me to give him. And I woke up and I said, Jesus, you're Lord. I give you my heart. And I had a download of the gospel. I had a download of the Bible, understanding the creation story, understanding the law, understanding the reason why Jesus came, and understanding what is to come in Judgment Day, literally supernaturally. I had read scripture in the past. I had heard the gospel in pieces, but not fully. No one had ever told me the full gospel. And I understood what Jesus did for me. And I understood the purpose of the scars on his wrists. I understood the purpose of why he said, give me your hearts, Aisha, and in return, I will love you forever. That's the gospel. Give everything to him. Your heart is everything. Your heart is the most vulnerable parts of you is your heart. And that's all of you. You know, your person and your dreams and your goals and your personality and all of who you are. You give your homie, give me all of that. And in exchange, I will love you forever. And the concept of love, the concept of forever didn't make no sense to me, but it was like enough for me to give him that crumb of my heart in exchange for eternity. And I said, yes, this is exactly what I need. I need this. I need this love. I need this assurance. I need this type of companionship to walk through life with. And I then realized in my room that the Lord gave me a glimpse, and this was just a short glimpse of seeing what was going on supernaturally in my house. I saw angels that were giants. They were so tall. They were like over 12 feet tall, like maybe more 20 feet tall. They were huge, wearing like bronze and gold and had wings, and they were just super strong, and they had light to them, and they were battling demons in my home. And the demons were tiny, very small, like Lego-sized creatures compared to the angels. And that's when I understood the battle I was living in my own home. I'm like, okay, now I understand why there's so much turmoil in my parents' bedroom, in the hallway, in my brother's room next door, in my own room with my own twin sister, and all of the concept of the war and good and evil. I understood the battle that we're living in here on this earth, and it made me understand why my family is living the way they live. Like the spiritual understanding of that, of the dark and evil, the good and light, fighting on a consistent basis. And that veil was open to me of understanding why I'm in so much pain, why they're in so much pain, why everyone is in so much pain outside of God, outside of knowing Jesus, that you're going to be in pain, and there's no way to recoup, and there's no way to reconcile, there's no way to kind of understand how and why you need to battle towards, the things that you're going through in your life. There is no real purpose unless you're doing it with the Lord. So he gave me a glimpse of that, and that really opened my eyes to understand, all right, I know why I'm here. I'm here to not only just change the atmosphere of wherever I go and have authority over it, but to know that this battle is not mine. It's God's. And in the midst of that, it was scary because I understood who I really am. I'm a daughter of the Most High King. But I didn't have the words to explain it. So that happened when I was in middle school. And even at a young age, it just didn't have a community of Christians. I didn't have a church group to go to dissect everything that I just shared. And it made me feel uncomfortable because I felt like I changed. I felt like a different person. I didn't feel like the same Aisha that moment on. And it made me feel like maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I made that all up or like push it down and like suppress it because that was just way too much. And it wasn't until I started college that I actually was able to tell my parents about this particular experience because I went through a season of my life that I was dating a guy and my parents, it was a secret relationship that I was in just because I wanted affection. And my parents found out. And everything just paused in my life. And my parents went back to that mindset of wanting to marry me off. And they were like, this is crazy. You're, dishonoring our family with this relationship. And, this is not okay. And I just felt the need to be more vulnerable of what I was struggling with mentally. And eventually shared this dream with my brother, my twin sister, and my mother. And in result, my brother said, "You're no longer my sister. You're crazy. Jesus can't be Lord. You're insane." Walked away. My twin sister, she said, "You're no longer my sister. You cannot worship Jesus. He is not Lord." And walked away. And then my mother came up to me and said, "Why didn't you tell us about this dream? We could have navigated this with you and, literally told you to tell you this is not real. You hallucinated. This is not real." And I told my mother, I said, "Mommy, you converted to a completely different religion that you grew up in. Why can't I?" I didn't know the lingo and all that, but Christianity, I only knew about just simple words. And just the fact that my mother had the freedom to change who she worshiped, I felt like she could understand my curiosity to want to know who Jesus is. Because I didn't even tell my family that I was considered Christian, but I did know that I believed in Jesus as being Lord. I didn't know all the terminology to say, I'm a Christian because I love Jesus. It was more of, I believe Jesus is Lord because he came to me and I gave my heart to him. And that was the concept that I understood. And that evening, my dad came home from work because there was already tension because of the drama with the relationship I was in and my family trying to figure me out, trying to correct me and fix me. And my dad, he and my mother went in the bedroom, they chatted, and then they had another family meeting with me and my siblings. And my dad said, "You need to renounce Jesus. You need to renounce Jesus. He's not God. We're Muslim in this home, and we worship Allah. Jesus is a prophet. And we respect Jesus, but we do not worship Jesus. You can't worship Jesus. He's not God." And I said, "No. Jesus is Lord. And he came and died for me. And I gave my life to him. And he pulled me to the ground, my father, and started kicking and punching me in front of my siblings and my mother. The rage behind that, I'll never forget. The most trying moment of my life. That moment. But God, the Lord spoke to me a second time in that dire need. He said, daughter, what you're experiencing now, I've experienced it too. So he gave me a glimpse of what he experienced on the cross. And it made me fall more in love with him. I was sold out. That was the moment I want to say I was like, I am sold out for Jesus. Because he spoke to me when I didn't even ask him. And he came and he reached into my life and spoke into my life. And this moment that I felt like I'm being honest, I'm finally being open about what I've been holding on to. And now the exchange of my vulnerability is pain. Made no sense to me. My family is expecting me to be not honest and open. And then they're telling me you can't believe in this. Because they're scared and didn't want to hear me out. I said, wow, God is real. He speaks to me. And that started really my back and forth conversation relationship with the Lord, is actually going to him and talking to him about my pain, talking to him about what I was confused about. And in result of all of that, my dad and I would have debates back and forth about Christianity, about Islam. And one day I would be like, okay, I agree with you, Papa G. But then the next day I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, I want to understand. I want to learn about who Jesus is. I want to read the Bible. I want to learn about what he did for me. And there was tension. There was so much tension in the home because of the unknown about what they were going to do to me. And also me not knowing what I was gonna do the next day. And I was more afraid of anything that my parents are gonna ship me off to Pakistan and just, all right, bye. You're married to your cousin or somebody and you're not our problem anymore. Because it would have been so easy for them to do that. And it was very scary. The unknown of every day. And so in the midst of that, I thought that this is a very even more of an unsafe environment to be in. At that point, I was already 18 years old, and I just felt like I couldn't be there anymore. And unfortunately, my parents, they had pulled me at that time to discontinue my college career, but they wanted to marry me off. They were just set on, we're going to marry you off, Aisha. This whole Christianity thing and this whole relationship thing, you're bringing such shame to our family. We're going to fix you and just get a man and you marry him and start having babies, basically. And then you're going to forget about Jesus. And I felt scared. I was like, no, this is not the way I want to live my life, right? And I felt like time was of the essence of, I can't live this life in this home, in this family. It just didn't feel like I could prosper. And unfortunately, in the midst of those plans, my best friend growing up, we both grew up in similar abusive homes. And for years, your best friend, you're like, you know what, when we get older, we're going to get an apartment together and we're going to, go to concerts and crowd surf and go to these tours and meet the bands that we love. And that's the type of things that we would talk about. And at that point, we were talking about getting an apartment together because my family, was raising up the stakes of their control and monitoring me on my phone and all that. And Victoria, my friend, she said, we'll get an apartment together. No problem. We're going to make this happen. And she wasn't in the States at the time. So it was kind of hard to make those plans happen quickly. And I remember one day I was traveling from her house and I was telling my mother that I was coming from school, but I was coming from another direction. My mother saw me turning into our neighborhood or going to turn into our neighborhood from another light. In opposite direction, which would make no sense to her because where the school was a different direction and where my friend's house was the other opposite direction. And I saw my mother And I turned to this neighborhood. It was just a hard right. It was weird. I made a hard right, turned to this neighborhood across from my the main street I grew up in. My mother parked right next to me, and at my window, I had my window down, and she slapped me. She said, "You need to go home. I don't know what you think you're doing, but you're not in the right direction. You're driving. You're supposed to be going home from school." And it shocked me that my mom would just like slap me like that, right? But it made it more of a urgent reason for me to like make these plans. So, because they were just so scared about what I was doing by myself. And with that, I unfortunately had and found the news that my mother brought us to a family meeting again, and I thought it was going to be about me. I'm like, okay, another debate, another, yell fest and screaming and all that. And for some reason, I received a vision of a white road, an icy road, and a car was just completely totaled. Like, that's weird. And my mother had the next moment she had spoke and said, Victoria passed away in a car accident this weekend. And I was shocked. I was like, hold up. You're making this up. Because I felt like she was my bridge out. My like legitimate person in my life that believed me, that understood what I was going through, that said, hey, we're gonna get you out of this situation. And gone. I was like, what? So at that point, I was like, okay, Lord, while I'm still sitting in my family, in my mind, I can't do this on my own. You have to help me out. I tried every physical way on my own to get to safety and openly worship you. And unfortunately, my plans all have fallen. All the bridges of opportunities have burned. You make a way now. And I surrendered the whole plan, the whole concept of leaving, I couldn't even fathom about how it would happen. And I just surrendered it. And in the midst of that, it was very, very painful and confusing because I felt like everything just made me feel like everything's impossible for me to like live in freedom. It felt worse than before the abuse, all this, the exposure of my dad contradicting himself and all this. I just felt like, what's the point? What's the point? I'm finally being honest and it's just getting worse. So when we attended Victoria's funeral, with my sister and my mother, I walked into the church with them. And I felt that peace from the dream the moment I walked into the church. And I said, okay, this is familiar to me, right? And I felt like this is the answer. This is obviously the environment I need to be in more, is the church. And during the service is a blur, but the last few moments of it was when they asked people to come up for communion. And my feet were on fire because I wanted to go up there. My feet were literally on fire, burning to receive communion. Without having a concept of what the meaning of it, I just was like, there's something in me that's pulling me to receive this blessing. And I couldn't do it. I was between my mother and sister. And that was the last moment I felt like, okay, this is the last time I'm ever going to feel like I can't worship you. And that changed my whole perspective on prayer and knowing that you need the right people in your life and praying for opportunities to come your way that are impossible, that only God can make happen. right? It says in all things, like, pray without ceasing. And that was definitely my life. From that point on, I lived my life. I'm like, okay, I need to pray and give this to the Lord so that he can make those doors open, because I cannot do it. And long story short, my parents did let me go back to school. He said, you're mourning your best friend. This is like, all these things are going on in your life. This is crazy. You can go to school, no problem. And that's when I met missionaries on campus that actually helped me leave my own home at 19 years old. They helped me plan my escape in the most literal term of figuring out the best route or best way, because my dad controlled my phone usage, my internet usage. He controlled my finances. He monitored like where I was. He monitored everything. And my sister and I went to the same school together. So it was even more of a tight, like of, I'm going to make sure you are doing everything I'm telling you to do, even outside the house. So, because that got worse, because it was already bad growing up, but it got worse. And when I met these two missionaries, I told them everything that I was going through, and they believed me. They actually believed everything I said, and they said, we're going to help you leave your house. If not only to worship Jesus, but because of the abuse that you're going through is illegal. The abuse that you're going through. So I said, y'all are crazy. If you're up for it, let's do it. So we did. And it took 4 months to plan, trial and error. That the whole planning of it, as I'm writing my autobiography, I'm going to commit a whole chapter to explaining what I had to do to make sure I left in a way that was safe for me and was a secret to my family. Because the day I did leave, my family called the police. They said I was kidnapped by Christian radicals because my house, my room was wasn't fully empty, but they could tell that I left. And they mentioned how I left something on top of the Quran. And this was my total mistake, that you're not supposed to put things on top of the Quran. And this was my total mistake, that I left something on the Quran, and that made them believe that I was kidnapped. When I did leave a note to my dad saying, I'm leaving, I can't live in this home anymore. I love you guys, but I can't, I'm done. And that started my public journey of worshiping Jesus with my whole life. And that was at 19 years old. And now in my mid-30s, and I've been serving the Lord and learning and being equipped more and more every day of knowing that his voice is more important than any other voice in my life. And that came to a cost, because I knew that I would never see my family again. And it was worth it, though, because I had freedom. I had not only my heart was freer, my mind was free, my body was free, the decisions were my own. I could learn and adjust, and if I did something wrong, I learned from it, and it wasn't, it was a better way of living life than just trying to be perfect all the time. That I had Christian community growing around me that protected me, and I lived as a nomad with no permanent address for 4 years. I had no permanent address. I had no real stable living for 4 years outside of living on campus. And that was my saving grace, because I had no bed, I had no job, I had no car, I had nothing, no phone, nothing. No way to even okay, I'm a 19-year-old literally living on my own with no one to help me. I mean, with this community, of course, but I didn't have anyone holding my hand to figure everything out. I had to figure things out every day and ask for counsel and get discipleship and and grow in the word and worship and focus on the Lord and still go to school and still pay bills and in some way be a functional adult, like quickly. And it made me grow quickly. So by the time I graduated, I did reach out to my family and ask them to attend my graduation, because first graduating, person on my mom's side, I was like, you know what, please come. Even if it's just in this arena, they're not going to be next to me. I'm not going to be afraid of like my life is, in danger. So they did come. So it took 4 years for me to reconcile with my family in person. And thankfully, since that moment, we built a friendship and relationship. And now I can tell you, like, I called my parents yesterday, like we're in good talking terms. When a couple years after I graduated, I met my husband. And at that point, I had been living on my own for so many years that, I was making my own decisions. At that point, I had my own apartment. I had my own car. I had graduated, got a job. I worked at the church I was part of. And after college. And when I met my husband, it's funny because when I met my husband, Tony, I had asked the Lord months before I met him, I know my children will witness to my family and they will come to know you, Lord, through them witnessing to my family in ways that I can't witness to them. Because I'm trying to witness to them and they don't understand why I live the way I live my life. They need to know you, Lord. But before I have kids, I need a husband. That's the order of things, right? So the Lord did tell me that he revealed to me a gentleman at my church. His name is Antonio, and everyone called him Tony. So I started praying for this guy. And it wasn't until a couple months later, I actually met my husband, Anthony, that everyone called him Tony. So God gave me my husband's name before I met my husband. And I was praying and interceding for this, whoever that was going to be, or if it was that person in front of me. And it was interesting because this youth group that we were part of, that we met at, everyone knew me, was my crew, and Tony started coming along. And when I did meet Tony, he said, I heard about your story and heard it was crazy. I want to hear it. And I said, I don't know. I don't just go out with dudes, right? I don't get coffee, right? That's just not what I do. I'm a leader at this church. I'm very careful with who I spend time with. And we all ended up at IHOP that same evening after service, and he sat next to me. And that's when my husband and I started talking. And a month later, he approached me after service and he said, Aisha, I intentionally want to get to know you. Do you have time on your calendar tomorrow to grab dessert with me? And I was like, wow, I've never been approached and pursued that way. And in the intentions of wanting to get to know me, right? And I started freaking out because I knew if I were to say yes to this man, it was God's destiny of me. Like, I'm all in. I knew it. I knew that when I heard Tony's name, that it was God, that this is the man of God for me. I knew it. And he didn't know it, but I knew. When I heard Tony's name, I knew it was. I looked over when I met him. I was like, wow, that man is so handsome. Like, I don't want to mess this up. I can't mess this up. He has to approach me. And then what Tony did a month later, I said, let's let you know that the Lord spoke to me and gave me the name Tony. And Tony said, well, I could be that Tony God pointed out. That's all on your court if you want to go out with me and at least spend time with me and get to know each other. That's all. And my response I said, I don't want to date. I want to get married. I don't want to waste my time with anyone because I've wasted my time in the past. My expectation is to get married. That's it. So if you're not willing to be God's best for me, I can't say yes to you. And Tony's response was, my intentions are marriage. And if it doesn't work out us talking and hanging out one-on-one, I need to get to know you. That's the only way that we can figure out if we're gonna go forward in that direction. But my intention is marriage. Dating doesn't work, and I want God to bless what's in front of me. And I said, all right, let's do it. And we went on a date the next day. I was very nervous. I was excited. And I knew something was different about him from the beginning, just because he was intentional about why he approached me and was very honest with what God had already spoken to him about. So in the midst of our date, I'm saying this because it's very important, right? Like, we went on our first date and I laid out all of like the trials that I had gone through and my testimony, because he wanted to hear my testimony, my background of the struggle that I was going through. And him and I made an agreement. We made an agreement because at that moment I was smoking a lot of weed to cope from a lot of the things I was going through post college and all that. And because it was hard for me to like adapt as an adult, again, in a different kind of, phase of my life. And my husband told me, he said, this can't be in your life, Aisha, because I want a woman of no reproach. So do you want destiny or do you want the world? And I kid you, Vladimir, I said, I want destiny. I don't want the world. I stopped all those vices that moment. And Tony and I got married months later. And our marriage is blessed. It's holy. It's just so beautiful and easy. Our relationship is so easy. He's the most easiest person for me to talk to and pray with and intercede with. And our goals are so lined up because we love Jesus. And now we run a ministry outside of our home, a house church that's thriving called Ruach, means breath of God, that we launched 2 years ago. And it's thriving and we're discipling people. We're also helping people in their finances. Like, we're entrepreneurs, like God is catapulting us to whole other levels because we are serving Jesus. And me doing these interviews, to be quite frank, is to share the gospel. Like, that's part of my calling. Part of my calling is to do this, is to share how good God is and how real he is and how it may be untapped, like, people, places in the world, but God can reach them, and I'm one of those people that it was impossible to even share the truth to me, and he did. And same with my husband's testimony. His testimony is crazy, just as crazy as mine is. He lived in the life of the world, and the Lord spoke to him in the middle of him being under the influence, and God changed him, and he radically changed, living completely sober after that point. Like, you can't make this up. Right? So knowing God's love story in our life is perfect. His timing is perfect. The waiting's hard, but his timing is perfect. So even as I share like parts of my story, new parts of my story, there's breakthrough that I'm experiencing every time I share, because he's a good God. He writes the best stories. The Bible is the best love story anyone can read. And if you read the Bible and you're bored, there's something wrong with you, because it's a crazy love story for humanity, for God to have come to earth, fix our problem of sin and being apart from him and saying, I'm rescuing you. I'm going to come and rescue you to myself. That's a good God. Because I grew up as a Muslim believing God can't come to this earth. God can't reach me. God can't speak to me. But a good God does that. A good God comes and walks amongst his people and shows them how to live a life that's perfect. And then also redeeming us and being the ultimate sacrifice and raising himself up so that we can be cleansed from sin, so he can live inside of us and have relationship with us. No matter how many times I mess up, no matter how many times I fall, no matter how many times I'm doubting, he's God Emmanuel. And that's how real he is every single day. And even creation adores him. There's no excuse for anyone on this earth to not know who God is. And eventually, there will be a day that every knee shall bow that Jesus Christ is Lord. And I look forward to that day. And I'm praying for my family. I'm praying and interceding for them. But I can't save my family. I'm not their savior. I can't tell them to pray to the Lord. I can't tell them to renounce their faith in Islam. I can't do that. But I can share the gospel. I can share one moment at every person that I can talk to in the marketplace, or when I'm on podcasts or writing my story and sharing the gospel and mentoring people to bring the gospel to people in every area of my life. And it's such an honor, again, even like to share on God's voice today, just because God's voice is today, right? It is, it's happening because he speaks to us all the time. We just have to respond to his calling. And that is the issue that we have. And now we're not responding to God's voice. But when we do, I promise you, when you hear the Lord's voice and you respond to it, you will never be the same. Because when he told me giving my heart to him, I didn't know that was enough. And it was. Even how little my heart felt, how messed up and how torn up and how I was lied to, how I was abused and just so discouraged. It was enough for me to give a little piece of me, to give him everything to me. So, that's my love story with him. It's not over. I have things God has promised me, Vladimir, and I'm looking forward to hearing more parts of like how God is just showing up and doing things in my life and through my husband and our ministry that God has blessed us with. We're just so honored to help expand the kingdom of God, the Great Commission. So, and doing this is part of that. And yeah, it's just been an honor to be able to share parts and details of it.
Beautiful. Aisha, thank you so much. I'm curious. Let's close a couple loops. I'm guessing your parents are still Muslim today, right?
Yes.
What about your siblings, your identical sister?
She is actually fraternal. We don't look alike at all. It's funny.
Oh, okay,
She looks Puerto Rican and I look more Indian. It's hilarious. She's still a Muslim, but I do believe things are going on in her heart. I do believe it. I see things shifting, but I have not heard her say, I've renounced Islam. So she's still a committed Muslim and actually learned Arabic to read the Quran in her adult years to really understand more of her faith.
Something you mentioned during your story, you were talking about your grandma, right? Or touching the Quran and the spirit that I guess spoke through her. I'm curious, close the loop on that. How did that work out? What was her end?
So, I mean, from just hearing stories and seeing things, she died with that living in her. So, I mean, I would see and hear her demeanor change when it would manifest and come up, and you would hear her voice drop. And she was already a very unpleasant person to be around because her anger was terrible. She had terrible anger. Like I can't even just like it was just a very uneasy person to be around. And but whenever that manifested, it just changed the atmosphere of the room. And she would literally smoke cigars, and her voice would deepen, and the family would just get excited to hear a word from this entity manifesting through her, as if it was, we're getting some type of revelation from Allah. And they believed everything it said, from, like I said, like business plans and marriages, like contracts and supernatural things that were going in the family. They knew about our family, and it helped navigate our family making difficult decisions all throughout, and it was just a normal thing that my family leaned on. And I knew that she received that demonic spirit from touching the Quran while she was on her period. So that's just her story. She didn't speak English at all, but it was more of like, people telling me the story from other, my cousins and my aunts and uncles. But my dad would tell me, yeah, this is how your grandmother has a spirit. So if it ever manifests in front of you, just bring any of us over and we'll help navigate the conversation. And it was really creepy, and it would manifest randomly. It was really, really creepy and scary.
Wow, interesting. Your
Yeah.
conversation with Jesus when he told you, give me your heart and I will love you forever. In that dream, did you actually hear his voice, or was it more of kind of like a spirit to spirit conversation?
Similar to you, what you experienced, more of, like telepathy type. I'd had understanding of what he was saying because I didn't see his face. I saw a beam of light coming out of his face, And I just understood that what he was speaking to me.
So prior to that dream, you were a Muslim, right?
Yes, 100%.
Wow, that's so cool. It's interesting because you hear this a lot nowadays, that Jesus shows up to Muslims in dreams. Like,
Yes.
there's so many videos I watched where it's the dreams. Why do you think it's that way?
As a very easy answer. So their, so-called prophet received dreams and visions, from what they say is Gabriel, Angel Gabriel, was just totally false. And that is a concept that Muslims believe, that when you go to sleep, you die. And you're vulnerable, your psyche is vulnerable, your subconscious is completely dead. And when you wake up, you're meant to basically live out as a pure person every day. So you're like being resurrected every day as a newborn person when you wake up. So you go to sleep, whatever sins and all this stuff that you went and experienced, it's behind you. And you wake up pure every day. And you have to maintain that purity through prayer. You have to maintain that purity through community service and doing things as the 5 pillars of Quran state. And if you don't, you're judged by that. And if you're not doing enough good or bad, that's going to dictate whether you go to heaven or hell. And one of the most vulnerable ways that Jesus is speaking to Muslims is when they're sleeping, because they have no control over their body and their mind. And they believe in dreams because they believe that Muhammad received dreams and visions to receive the Quran. So it's a very sacred time of a human life when they're dreaming. So that's a very niche place that God is using to wreck people's ideology and just change their perspective. And even in college, I went to the Middle East and Lebanon to serve a ministry called Heart for Lebanon. Look them up. They're phenomenal. They're doing wonderful things right now to this day. This is over 2 decades ago that I went, over a decade ago, more than 15 years ago, and they're still doing God's work. And everyone that works there is ex-Muslim. And I remember one guy, his testimony was crazy. He said, Aisha, I also experienced, being in a white room, and I saw a lamb, and the lamb had his throat cut open, and the Lord had all the blood of the lamb fell on top of me, and he understood what Jesus covered him in the blood and redeemed him. And these are common dreams. So it wasn't until I went on a mission trip that I met other people that experienced dreams and visions, and it was a common thing because of the vulnerable part of Muslims' lives. And it's amazing because it's now more common, right? Just because internet is making it more prevalent. I believe there's more people that are more bold to share their testimony. For many years, I didn't share a lot of parts of my life online because I was scared. And God called me back 5 years ago now to start sharing online because he said, you're ready. You would learn enough. You're not in danger anymore. You're solid in your faith. And quite frankly, I'm not afraid anymore. And I remember when I first shared my testimony online, I was scared because ever since then I've had reports from my family. Hey, I saw your testimony online. Why are you lying about our family? You're crazy, Aisha, and I can't believe that you're spreading lies about Islam. And I'm just responding in love because I'm telling you, this is my story. Like, you could actually hear the whole thing because they've heard bits and pieces, but not the whole thing. So I'm going to still keep sharing my story as many times as I can and, wrap up my book that God has put on my heart to share. But really, I want to equip men and women in Islam to ask for God to reveal himself to them.
Hey, before we get back to the episode, I want to give you 2 free books written by my father, who was an underground minister in the USSR. His first book dives into what it really means to walk with God in the Spirit, covering things like prayer, the Holy Spirit, and spiritual growth. The second book is his personal journey, stories of persecution, miracles, and how God led our family of 9 children through some of the hardest seasons. You can grab both of them for free at godsvoiceday.com/books. And now let's get back to the episode. Let's say someone is watching you right now. They're a Muslim, or maybe they did have that dream just like you did.
Yeah.
And they're scared. I mean, I can imagine that family. They're scared of being excommunicated, right? Kicked out,
Yep.
disowned. They're
Yep.
worried, just like you were, right? So,
Yep.
what advice would you give to that person if you went back in time? And I'm sure you were probably in a similar situation. You were afraid. I mean, being kicked
Pretty
out of the
much.
family, not to talk to your parents again, it's tough. The only
Very
people you know. What would you
Yeah.
tell that person?
It's still tough to this day. Even having talked to my family yesterday, it's very hard. I can't open parts of my life with them. They don't understand why I live the life I live. I would say that Jesus is worth it,
Mm.
mainly because he's the best relationship you'll ever be in, even being happily married. My husband's in our living room right now. He's the closest to living Jesus that I have in my life. We live together being Jesus to each other. And my relationship with Jesus is more important than my relationship with my husband. And his relationship with Jesus is more important than my relationship with him. And we're second to each other. I am not his first. I'm second. And it's always been that way in every relationship I've ever been in since Jesus came to me in my dream. And that dream, that relationship is the most important because he is there. He also understands the physical pain, the emotional pain, the abuse, the abandonment. He understands to what it means to be forsaken by everybody, even God himself, like the Lord, just like, you know what? He faced it all, but then he defeated it by raising himself up. So it's worth to die for Jesus. It's worth getting scared for Jesus. It's worth walking in the unknown. I'm still walking in the unknown in things, but God has promised me things. So I'm still holding on to his promises for my future and things that may happen tomorrow or may not happen 10 years from now. But he's with me in the midst of everything that I'm going through, right? And that's the only thing that's worth living for, because he's also giving me the Bible to read. And I'll be giving an encouraging word to those that can't even read the Bible. Because there was a moment in my life that I couldn't read the Bible openly because of the things I was going through in my home. I went through that type of persecution of not being able to open my Bible up without fear. I went through that in the United States of America, in Northern Virginia. It is happening now. It is happening everywhere, not only in North Korea, not only in Iran, not only in all these places that it's illegal to have a Bible. It's happening everywhere. So if anything, ask the Lord to reveal himself to you and he will do the rest. He will give you scripture, because I've heard testimonies of people having verses just burnt in their heart and they're just singing it over and over again. Only one verse that burns in their heart and they're just living in that one verse because the word of God is alive. So if you are in a place that you can get a Bible, get a Bible. Download the on your phone. Like, even if, I can understand the fear. Even as a female, as a whole level of fear, right? Whenever you do things, and as a ex-Muslim, but I would challenge that and say, what is it worth still living in fear, or asking God to really like walk you through that fear, walk you in that fear, because he understands it.
Absolutely. There's peace on the other side of fear. Well, in closing, for those that want to get in touch with you, what would be the best way?
So there's a few ways. I'm a huge video gamer. The Lord is using me to witness to people while I'm streaming video games and sharing the gospel to people through my YouTube channel. It's called Gameplay Replay, and I'm using it to not only share my story, but like share scripture and also share the games that I'm playing. And it's just been a fun journey with the Lord, being able to meet people that way. And you can find me on YouTube and on Instagram that way. But on a personal way to reach out to me too is on Facebook. Just look me up, Aisha Borden, and you'll find me there. But just also know that as us Christians, this content is going to ramp up more. This type of content is going to ramp up more. And I do believe what you're doing, Vladimir, it's totally God's will to to expand the Great Commission and share and echo the gospel through media, through communication and digital art and all that, because we need more of a saturated truth of freedom, of what the not only from what the Bible has in store for people, but the freedom of being redeemed by the blood of Jesus, and having that intimate relationship with the Father, and having the Holy Spirit to live inside of us. That is, we're gonna keep doing that through social media and just saturated with the truth, because we need more of it.
Love all that. And thank you so much for being so bold, sharing the gospel, sharing your testimony. And shout out to Tony for being an amazing husband. What a story. What a testimony, both of you guys. Thank you so much for your time, for stepping away from everything you had going on to hang out with me and share this testimony. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's an honor.
Hey, thank you so much for watching. If today's episode spoke to you, share with someone who needs to hear it. And if you had a supernatural encounter of your own, I'd love to hear it. Just go to godsvoicetoday.com/call to schedule your call. And I'll see you in the next episode. It should be coming up right here on the screen.